Hari Om, Radiant Divine Souls. Welcome back to this channel, Jagrita Nabodhita. I've shared some of my thoughts in my earlier videos in this channel, and they were encouraging words from some of our souls amongst us, asking me to share something more than what it is talked as of now. They want to know more about the consciousness and the types of consciousness, and how do we really move towards this ultimate thing, the purpose and the existence of life. So I thought I would get into details of something on flowering of consciousness. So this session is about flowering of consciousness. It is nothing but how a flower blooms. So consciousness also have a similar way of blossoming. There's a beautiful saying in Bhagavad Gita about whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, he will attain that. It's in the chapter 8, the point 6, you can refer that. It is an interesting fact. So when ultimately this body quits, whatever it thinks or remembers will certainly happen. If that is so, it is necessary for us to understand the value of this human being as a form of birth in this earth plane. If that is the case, what are we doing from our end to know the purpose of existence, and how do we change ourselves to look at the final goal or destiny where we want to be? Man imagines that we are the pinnacle of evolution. But to be very honest, in reality, we are more animalistic than other animals. Whether you will agree or not, I've been observing this happening around us, and some of you would have experienced as well. Humans tend to display more irrational cruelty, and we are also more towards destructive of nature than any other fellow creatures we have. So it is getting reflected in our eating habits, in our sleeping habits, in our mating habits, and defending patterns what we see in the recent times is indicating that we are more towards animalistic than humanistic. So humanism is a question mark in this age. One thing is very clear in this world: human form of life is a special creation of the Lord, because the Creator thought that we are going to have higher level of thinking and higher level of humanism, higher level of understanding beyond intellect, able to discriminate what's really good for the society. But unfortunately, things don't move the way he thought about probably. The human and beast share similar bones. I'm talking about beasts and human share similar bones, skin, hair, eyes, noses, hearts, and minds also. Finally, the ability to act rationally is also there between us and the beast. So, the only difference is animals will not try to understand the purpose of existence, purpose of birth, and the origin. There is no evidence to prove that animals think about that or they behave to the nature in such a way that they are able to use the other senses, higher level of consciousness. So when you talk about, there are 5 types of consciousness. Some people wanted to understand this clearly before we talked about divinity, which I think I covered in my second session. The first consciousness is called a covered consciousness, which is nothing but avrita. And the second consciousness is a shrunken consciousness, which is nothing but Shankuchit. We call it in Hindi as well as our local languages. And the third one is about budding consciousness. So it is called Muklita. So the Mug, somewhere it is used in southern India. So Mug is nothing but Muklita is a budding concept of consciousness. And the next level of consciousness is blooming. So we call it Vikasita. So the blooming consciousness is a Vikasita, the next level of consciousness, where you go beyond budding and you start blooming or blossoming, whatever you call it. Then the final one, we call it fully bloomed state of consciousness, which is called Purana Vikasita. So these are the 5 types of consciousness you must understand. I will give an example to make you, feel good about our consciousness at what level we are in. So trees and plants are inert and they are up to covered consciousness stage only. So we go and travel beyond at least 4 plus maybe 2 levels more. So humans have innate ability to bloom, develop their consciousness beyond the 5 consciousness I talked about. And it also goes beyond that, why I said, because the divine consciousness is not actually defined in these things. But once you attain these 5 levels, you move towards the 6th level, which is nothing but divine consciousness. So what we weave, we are going to wear later on. So if you're going to weave good clothes now, probably you will wear the same thing later on. So our samskaras are very, very important when you're talking about it, because the human birth, as I told, is very, very special for us. And it is the highest form of birth, which the Creator thought about it. And we have the ability to interpret every sense perception, which normally the animals cannot. So we have the special ability to interpret every sense perception. What does it mean and how is it going to help you, and whether you want to chase that perception or not, you want to indulge in that or not, all your decisions. But your decisions also matter in terms of your future. That's what we have to be very, very clear about it. The 5 senses which I talked about, evoke different types of psychological and emotional reactions. And these things are not similar with every single person. It may be different for different people. But what level of consciousness we are there will decide how do we react to that psychologically and emotionally. Because the 5 senses, if they're chasing the sensual object, the sensory objects, then we are moving towards a consciousness which is chasing the material and the desire, maybe a short-term pleasure. So we move on to the next chapter of that divine consciousness, in detail. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to this types of consciousness and also the flowering part of consciousness. I hope it was useful to you to understand and how to take the inner journey to make it further blossoming in terms of consciousness. Thank you so much.